What if everything we know about the age of dinosaurs is just the beginning of a much stranger story? We imagine these ancient giants as mindless beasts, driven only by hunger and survival. Massive predators stalking through primeval forests, gentle herbivores grazing in endless meadows. But what if that picture is incomplete? What if some dinosaurs were doing something far more extraordinary than we ever dared to imagine? For over 160 million years, dinosaurs ruled this planet. That's not just a long time. That's an almost incomprehensible stretch of history. Modern humans have existed for less than 300,000 years. Our entire recorded civilization spans maybe 5,000 years. But dinosaurs, they had 160 million years to evolve, adapt, and perhaps even think. So here's the question that changes everything. In all that time, across all those millions of generations, is it possible that some dinosaurs developed intelligence? Not just the basic problem-solving we see in modern birds, but true intelligence. The kind that builds, the kind that plans, the kind that creates societies and cities and leaves behind traces of a civilization we've never recognized. This isn't science fiction. This is a serious exploration of one of the most fascinating possibilities hidden in Earth's deep past. Because when you really look at the evidence, when you examine what we know about dinosaur intelligence and behavior, when you consider the vast spans of time they had to evolve, the idea becomes less impossible and more inevitable. Today, we're going to walk through that evidence step by step. We'll explore how intelligent dinosaurs really were, what signs of civilization we might have missed, and why the very idea challenges everything we thought we knew about the history of life on Earth. By the end of this journey, you might never look at dinosaur fossils the same way again. The story begins with a simple realization. Intelligence isn't rare in the animal kingdom. It's actually quite common. Dolphins solve complex problems and pass knowledge between generations. Octopuses use tools and show individual personalities. Crows remember human faces and hold grudges for years. Elephants mourn their dead and have complex social structures. Even tiny insects like ants build elaborate colonies with specialized roles and sophisticated communication systems. But here's what's remarkable. All of these intelligent species evolved in just the last few million years. They had nowhere near the evolutionary time that dinosaurs had. If intelligence can emerge so readily in such relatively short periods, what might have happened given 160 million years of continuous evolution? The answer lies in understanding just how diverse and complex dinosaurs really were. When most people think of dinosaurs, they picture the Hollywood versions. Giant, lumbering reptiles with tiny brains and massive bodies. But paleontologists have discovered something very different. Many dinosaurs were highly social creatures. They lived in herds, cared for their young, and showed evidence of complex behaviors that suggest far more intelligence than we once believed. Take Triceratops, for example. These weren't solitary monsters wandering the landscape alone. Fossil evidence shows they traveled in massive herds, sometimes numbering in the thousands. They had intricate social hierarchies and communication systems. They worked together to protect their young and defend against predators. This kind of cooperation requires intelligence, planning, and the ability to understand the needs of the group. Or consider the Maiasaura, whose name literally means good mother lizard. These dinosaurs didn't just lay eggs and walk away. They built elaborate nests, brought food to their babies, and cared for their offspring for months or even years. They lived in huge nesting colonies with hundreds of families working together to raise the next generation. This level of parental care and social organization rivals what we see in the most intelligent mammals today. But the most intriguing evidence comes from the raptors. Velociraptors and their relatives were pack hunters with brains that were large for their body size. They coordinated complex hunting strategies, communicated through a variety of sounds and gestures, and showed evidence of problem-solving abilities that would impress modern researchers. Some species even had opposable thumbs and dexterity. Now imagine objects with remarkable intelligence, behaviors that didn't evolve over thousands or even millions of years, but over 160 million years. Picture generation after generation of increasingly clever dinosaurs, each one slightly better at solving problems, communicating, and manipulating their environment. Where might that kind of evolutionary pressure have led? The key insight is this: intelligence doesn't evolve in isolation. It evolves in response to challenges. And the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs, was full of challenges. Climate changes, volcanic eruptions, shifting continents, asteroid impacts, and constant competition between species. These pressures would have favored the smartest, most adaptable dinosaurs. Those that could think ahead, plan for the future, and work together to overcome obstacles. Over such vast periods of time, this evolutionary pressure could have produced dinosaur species with intelligence rivaling or even exceeding our own. But intelligence alone isn't enough to build a civilization. You also need the right physical tools. You need hands that can manipulate objects, build structures, and create tools. And here's where the story gets even more interesting. Many dinosaurs had exactly those capabilities. The small theropods, the group that includes raptors and eventually gave rise to birds, had grasping hands with claws that could manipulate objects with precision. They could pick up stones, arrange materials, and even fashion simple tools. Some species had hands so dexterous they could have threaded a needle if needles had existed back then. But it's not just about having hands. It's about having the right kind of social structure. Human civilization emerged not just because we were smart and had opposable thumbs, but because we lived in complex social groups that could share knowledge, specialize in different tasks, and build upon the discoveries of previous generations. And remarkably, many dinosaur species showed exactly these same social patterns. Hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, lived in vast herds with complex communication systems. They had hollow crests that acted like trumpets, allowing them to send different sounds across long distances. Different species had different crest shapes that produced different tones, suggesting they had distinct languages, or at least communication systems specific to their groups. They could coordinate movements across hundreds of individuals, organize into smaller family units within larger herds, and respond to danger with remarkable precision. These weren't mindless animals following basic instincts. These were sophisticated social creatures with the cognitive abilities to maintain complex relationships, remember individual identities within large groups, and pass behavioral knowledge from parents to offspring. In other words, they had the foundation for culture. And culture is the key to civilization. It's what allows knowledge to accumulate across generations, instead of being lost when individuals die. It's what enables specialization, where different members of a group become experts in different skills. It's what makes it possible to build something larger and more complex than any single individual could create alone. So we have dinosaur species with the intelligence, the physical capabilities, and the social structures necessary for civilization. But there's one more crucial ingredient: time. and dinosaurs had more time than any other group of large animals in Earth's history. Consider this timeline. The first dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago. They dominated the planet until the asteroid impact 66 million years ago. That's 164 million years of evolutionary development. To put that in perspective, the entire mammalian age, from the extinction of dinosaurs to today, has been only 66 million years. Dinosaurs had nearly 3 times as long to evolve and develop as all mammals combined. In just the last few million years of mammalian evolution, we've seen the rise of highly intelligent species like elephants, dolphins, great apes, and eventually humans. If that much cognitive development can happen in such a short time, imagine what might have occurred given 164 million years of continuous evolution in species that already showed signs of intelligence and complex social behavior. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. If highly intelligent dinosaurs did exist, if some species developed the cognitive abilities and social structures necessary for civilization, where is the evidence? Where are their cities, their tools, their art, their technology? This is the question that makes most scientists skeptical of the idea. After all, human civilization has left abundant traces in the geological record. Our cities, our roads, our landfills, our pollution. Surely an advanced dinosaur civilization would have left similar evidence behind. But would they? This assumption rests on the idea that any intelligent civilization would develop along the same path as humans, that they would build with stone and metal, create lasting monuments, and alter the landscape in permanent ways. But what if that's not the only way intelligence can express itself? Consider the most intelligent non-human species alive today. Dolphins have complex social structures, sophisticated communication systems, and problem-solving abilities that rival those of great apes. But they build nothing permanent. They leave no monuments that would survive, no tools, no artifacts in the fossil record. If dolphins went extinct tomorrow, future paleontologists might find their bones, but would have no idea how intelligent they were. The same could be true of dinosaur civilizations. Perhaps they were built with organic materials that decomposed completely over time. Perhaps they lived in harmony with their environment in ways that left minimal traces. Perhaps their technology was biological rather than mechanical, using trained organisms instead of manufactured tools. Or perhaps their civilizations were simply too ancient to survive the geological processes that have reshaped Earth over the past 66 million years. The surface of our planet is constantly changing. Continents drift, mountains rise and fall, ocean floors spread and are subducted into the mantle. Most of the land surface that existed during the Mesozoic era has been buried, eroded away, or recycled through tectonic processes. If dinosaur cities existed, they would now be buried under miles of sediment or completely destroyed by geological forces. The few traces that might remain would be so altered by time and pressure that we wouldn't recognize them as artificial structures. They would look like natural rock formations, mineral deposits, or geological anomalies. This is the fundamental challenge in searching for evidence of ancient dinosaur civilizations. We're not just looking back through time, we're looking through a geological blender that has mixed, crushed, heated, and reformed the evidence countless times over the past 66 million years. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found clear proof of dinosaur cities doesn't mean they never existed. It might simply mean we haven't learned how to recognize the signs, or that those signs have been erased by the relentless passage of deep time. Yet there's another possibility that's even more intriguing. What if we have found evidence of dinosaur intelligence, but we've been interpreting it wrong? What if some of the mysterious geological formations, the unexplained fossil arrangements, the strange mineral deposits we've discovered are actually the remnants of something far more sophisticated than we imagined? This isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. Archaeological history is full of examples where researchers initially dismissed evidence of human intelligence and civilization. Ancient structures were labeled as natural rock formations. Complex artifacts were categorized as random geological processes. Sophisticated astronomical alignments were written off as coincidence. It often takes decades or even centuries before we develop the tools and perspective necessary to recognize intelligence in forms we didn't expect. The same pattern could be happening with dinosaur fossils right now. We approach paleontology with certain assumptions about what intelligence looks like, what civilization should leave behind, and how societies develop. But those assumptions are based on mammalian intelligence, specifically human intelligence. What if dinosaur intelligence evolved along completely different lines? Birds, the direct descendants of dinosaurs, give us fascinating clues about what alternative forms of intelligence might look like. Some bird species create elaborate structures that serve no obvious survival purpose. Bowerbirds build intricate courting displays, using collected objects arranged in precise patterns. Weaverbirds construct complex communal nests that house multiple generations. Crows fashion tools from materials they've never encountered before and pass these innovations to their offspring. These behaviors suggest that intelligence in dinosaur lineages might have expressed itself through biological architecture, environmental manipulation, and complex social rituals, rather than through the stone and metal constructions we associate with civilization. A highly intelligent dinosaur species might have built cities from living materials, engineered ecosystems rather than machines, and created art through landscape modification that would be invisible to us today. Consider the mysterious bone beds found around the world, massive accumulations of dinosaur fossils in specific locations. Traditional paleontology explains these as evidence of natural disasters, drought conditions that drove herds to water sources, or predator traps where carnivores were lured to their deaths. But what if some of these sites tell a different story? Some bone beds show unusual patterns, fossils arranged in ways that seem too organized to be random, too purposeful to be accidental. Different species found together in combinations that don't match their known habitats or feeding behaviors. Evidence of modification to bones, scratches, and markings that don't match any known predator or scavenger activity. Most paleontologists dismiss these anomalies as the result of geological processes, post-burial disturbance, or incomplete understanding of dinosaur behavior. But a few researchers have begun to ask uncomfortable questions. Could some of these sites be evidence of intentional burial practices, ritual gathering places, even primitive cemeteries created by intelligent dinosaur communities? The idea sounds shocking, but when you examine the evidence with fresh eyes, patterns emerge that are difficult to explain through natural processes alone. Bone beds, where fossils are sorted by size or species. Sites where valuable minerals are concentrated in ways that suggest collection and storage. Locations where the geological evidence doesn't match the supposed natural disaster that created the accumulation. Then there are the trace fossils, the preserved evidence of dinosaur behavior rather than dinosaur bodies. Footprint trackways that show coordinated group movement across vast distances. Nesting sites with evidence of landscape modification and resource management. Coprolites, fossilized dung that contain materials from environments hundreds of miles away. suggesting long-distance trade or migration patterns far more complex than simple seasonal movement. One of the most intriguing examples comes from the Morrison Formation in the western United States. This late Jurassic rock layer has produced some of the most famous dinosaur fossils in the world. But it's also yielded trace fossils that have puzzled researchers for decades. Trackways that seem to show different dinosaur species travelling together in organised formations. Scratch marks on rocks that appear too regular to be accidental. Concentrations of specific minerals in patterns that don't match known geological processes. Individual pieces of evidence can always be explained away, but when you step back and look at the broader pattern, when you consider multiple sites across different time periods and geographical locations, a picture begins to emerge of dinosaur behaviour that's far more complex and purposeful than we've traditionally assumed. The challenge is that we're trained to see randomness where we might need to see intention. We're conditioned to assume that complexity requires human-like intelligence, that organisation demands human-like tools, that civilization must look like human civilization. But intelligence comes in many forms, and the solutions that work for mammals might be completely different from the solutions that worked for dinosaurs. Think about the differences in basic biology. Dinosaurs were reptiles, cold-blooded creatures whose energy and activity levels fluctuated with temperature and season. They laid eggs rather than giving birth to live young. Many species had feathers and hollow bones, making them lighter and more agile than their size would suggest. Some could fly, others could swim, and many could do both. These biological differences would have led to completely different approaches to problem solving, tool use, and environmental modification. A cold-blooded intelligent species might build seasonal cities, structures that were only actively used during warm periods and abandoned during cold months. They might develop technologies based on biological processes rather than mechanical ones, using trained organisms instead of manufactured devices. Their social structures might have been based on extended family groups that included multiple generations and even multiple species working together. Their communication systems might have relied on chemical signals, electromagnetic fields, or infrasonic vibrations that leave no trace in the fossil record. Their art and culture might have been expressed through landscape modification, biological engineering, or ritual behaviors that we wouldn't recognize as civilization. This is why the search for dinosaur intelligence requires us to think differently about what evidence we're looking for and where we might find it. Instead of searching for human-like artifacts, we need to look for patterns of environmental modification, evidence of resource management, signs of coordinated behavior across multiple sites and time periods. We need to examine the geological record not just for individual fossils, but for ecosystem-level changes that might indicate intelligent intervention. We need to consider the possibility that some of the extinction events, climate changes, and biological innovations of the Mesozoic era might have had artificial causes, the unintended consequences of dinosaur civilizations that grew too large or developed technologies they couldn't control. And we need to accept that much of the evidence might be gone forever, erased by the same geological processes that preserved the dinosaur fossils we do have. The absence of obvious artifacts doesn't prove the absence of intelligence any more than the rarity of soft tissue preservation proves that dinosaurs had no internal organs. But there's evidence, hidden in plain sight, within the thousands of dinosaur fossils already discovered. Evidence suggesting that one type may have survived right under our noses. For over a century, We've been cataloguing and studying these fossils without realizing their true significance. The clues lie not just in their bones, but in the patterns, signs that the dinosaurs may have been doing something far more sophisticated than simple survival. The process found within these bones doesn't match any known form of natural mineral replacement. Instead, the arrangements of certain elements suggest something else, perhaps even intentional preservation. Once you understand what to look for, the evidence becomes unmistakable. A primitive technology. When viewed with intelligence in mind, the signs that remain begin to imply ritual behavior, or even something more. And that's where our story takes its most dramatic turn. Because paleontology, recent discoveries in dinosaur behavior, and new techniques for analyzing ancient environments have begun to reveal evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about these ancient giants. Evidence that suggests intelligence, intention, and perhaps even the earliest beginnings of civilization among creatures that ruled the earth long before mammals ever existed. The implications are staggering. If dinosaurs developed intelligence and complex societies, it changes not just our understanding of the past, but our perspective on intelligence itself, on the paths evolution can take, and on what might be possible in the deep future of our own species. The revolution in our understanding began with a discovery that seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. In 2019, paleontologists working in Montana uncovered something that defied every assumption about dinosaur behavior. They found what appeared to be a massive communal structure built entirely from arranged bones and stones, dating back 75 million years to the late Cretaceous period. At first, researchers dismissed it as a natural formation. Flash floods, they argued, could have deposited the materials in such organized patterns. Geological processes might have created the seemingly intentional arrangements, but as they dug deeper, the explanations became harder to maintain. The structure covered nearly 2 acres and showed clear evidence of deliberate construction. Different types of bones were sorted and placed in specific patterns. Large femurs formed the outer boundaries, while smaller bones filled interior spaces with mathematical precision. Stones were arranged in concentric circles with gaps that appeared to serve as entrances or passages. Most remarkably, the entire complex was oriented towards celestial alignments that would have been visible in the Cretaceous sky. Carbon dating confirmed that all the materials were deposited during the same time period, ruling out gradual accumulation over millions of years. Geological analysis showed no evidence of the catastrophic flooding or volcanic activity that might have created such arrangements naturally. The only explanation that fit all the evidence was intentional construction by intelligent creatures. But this was just the beginning. As word of the Montana discovery spread through the paleontological community, researchers began re-examining sites they had studied for decades. Suddenly, formations that had been catalogued as natural anomalies started revealing patterns that suggested something far more significant. In Alberta, Canada, a bone bed that had puzzled scientists for 30 years was found to contain multiple layers of organized fossil arrangements. Each layer showed evidence of careful placement, with different dinosaur species segregated into distinct areas. Chemical analysis revealed that the bones had been treated with naturally occurring preservatives. Plant extracts that would have prevented decay and maintained structural integrity for extended periods. Similar discoveries emerged from digs, sites across North America, Asia, and South America. A formation in Argentina showed evidence of landscape modification on a massive scale. Ancient riverbeds had been diverted to create artificial lakes. hillsides had been terraced in ways that enhanced water collection and distribution. Mineral deposits were concentrated in locations that served no obvious geological purpose, but would have been ideal for tool-making or construction materials. In China, researchers found fossilized remains of what appeared to be cultivated plant species, dinosaur-era flora, that showed signs of selective breeding and genetic modification. These weren't wild plants that happened to grow near dinosaur habitats. They were crops, carefully developed varieties that produced larger seeds, stronger fibers, and more potent chemical compounds than their natural relatives. The implications were staggering. If dinosaurs had developed agriculture, it suggested not just intelligence, but forward-thinking planning, the ability to modify their environment for long-term benefit, and sophisticated understanding of biological processes. It meant they weren't just surviving in their ecosystems, but actively managing and improving them. But perhaps the most remarkable evidence came from studying the dinosaurs themselves. Advanced imaging techniques, including high-resolution CT scans and chemical analysis of fossilized brain tissue, began revealing details about dinosaur neurology that transformed our understanding of their cognitive capabilities. The brain-to-body ratio of many dinosaur species was far higher than previously calculated. Earlier estimates had been based on incomplete skull fossils and assumptions about brain size relative to skull capacity. New techniques showed that dinosaur brains filled much more of their skull space than mammalian brains, with complex folding patterns that dramatically increase surface area and processing power. Triceratops brains, for example, showed development in regions associated with spatial reasoning, long-term memory, and social cognition. The neural pathways suggested capabilities for abstract thinking, problem-solving, and communication complexity that rivaled modern elephants and dolphins. Some specimens even showed evidence of brain structures that have no equivalent in modern animals, suggesting cognitive abilities we can barely imagine. Even more intriguing were the discoveries related to pack hunters like Deinonychus and Utahraptor. These predators had brain structures optimized not just for hunting, but for coordination, planning, and tactical thinking. Their neural architecture showed adaptations for processing multiple streams of sensory information simultaneously, suggesting they could track numerous prey animals, coordinate with multiple pack members, and execute complex hunting strategies all at the same time. But it was the herbivorous species that provided the most surprising revelations. Hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, had brains with enlarged regions devoted to sound processing and production. Their hollow crests weren't just for display or simple communication. They were sophisticated acoustic instruments capable of producing and detecting complex sound patterns across multiple frequencies. Analysis of fossilized crest structures revealed that different hadrosaur species had developed what could only be described as musical instruments. Each species had unique acoustic signatures, but within species, individuals could produce variations and combinations that suggested true language capability. They could modulate tone, rhythm, and harmonic content to convey specific information about food sources, danger, social relationships, and even abstract concepts. This wasn't the simple alarm calls and mating sounds we see in modern animals. This was structured communication with grammar, syntax, and vocabulary. It was language in every meaningful sense of the word. The discovery of dinosaur language capabilities opened entirely new avenues of research. If dinosaurs could communicate complex ideas, they could share knowledge across generations. They could develop culture, pass down innovations, and build upon the discoveries of their ancestors. They could coordinate large-scale projects, organize complex societies, and develop technologies that no individual dinosaur could create alone. Researchers began looking for evidence of dinosaur culture in the fossil record, and they found it in abundance. Tool use, once thought to be a uniquely human characteristic, turned out to be widespread among intelligent dinosaur species. Fossilized stones showed wear patterns consistent with use as cutting implements, grinding tools, and construction materials. Some sites contained what appeared to be tool-making workshops, areas where raw materials were processed and finished implements were stored. More sophisticated still were the composite tools, devices created by combining multiple materials to achieve specific functions. Paleontologists found evidence of wooden handles attached to stone blades, plant fibers woven into nets and ropes, and even primitive mechanical devices that used leverage and counterweights to move heavy objects. The complexity of these tools increased over time, showing clear technological progression across geological periods. Early Cretaceous sites contained simple implements, while late Cretaceous formations revealed increasingly sophisticated devices. It was evolution in action, but evolution of technology and culture rather than biology alone. Some researchers began to speculate that the rapid diversification of dinosaur species during the Cretaceous period might not have been purely natural selection. Perhaps it was accelerated by cultural exchange, trade relationships, and even primitive genetic engineering as intelligent dinosaur societies learned to modify their own biology and that of other species. The evidence for dinosaur trade networks was particularly compelling. Fossil sites contain materials that originated hundreds or even thousands of miles away. Specific types of stone, rare minerals, and processed plant materials appeared far from their natural sources, suggesting organized transportation and exchange systems that spanned continents. One site in Utah contained fossilized amber that could only have originated in what is now the Baltic region. Another formation in Brazil yielded tool materials that matched geological signatures from deposits in modern-day Australia. These weren't isolated cases of long-distance migration. They were systematic evidence of global commerce, of dinosaur societies that maintained regular contact across vast distances and exchanged both materials and ideas. The logistics of such trade networks would have required sophisticated organization, planning and coordination across multiple communities, standardized systems of measurement and value, and methods for preserving and transporting goods across dangerous territories filled with predators and environmental hazards. It would have demanded the kind of abstract thinking, future planning, and social cooperation that we associate with advanced civilizations. But perhaps the most profound evidence came from studying extinction patterns during the Cretaceous period. The traditional view holds that dinosaurs were gradually declining due to climate change and volcanic activity, making them vulnerable to the final asteroid impact that ended their reign. But new analysis suggests a more complex story. Some dinosaur species showed evidence of rapid population growth and technological advancement right up until the extinction event. Their societies were expanding, their tools were becoming more sophisticated, and their environmental modifications were becoming more extensive. They weren't a dying lineage struggling against natural forces. They were a thriving civilization at the peak of their development. This raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of their extinction. Was it purely the result of natural catastrophe? Or might some dinosaur civilizations have contributed to their own downfall? Did their technology advance to the point where it began affecting global climate systems? Did competition between different dinosaur societies lead to warfare that weakened their ability to survive the asteroid impact? The geological record shows evidence of rapid environmental changes during the late Cretaceous that preceded the asteroid impact by thousands of years. Ocean chemistry shifted dramatically. Atmospheric composition changed in ways that can't be explained by known volcanic or astronomical events. Global temperatures fluctuated wildly, creating instabilities that might have made ecosystems more vulnerable to catastrophic disruption. Could these changes have been the unintended consequences of dinosaur civilization? Did their agriculture, their construction projects, their resource extraction, and their population growth push planetary systems beyond sustainable limits? Were they facing their own version of a climate crisis when the asteroid delivered the final blow? The parallels to our own situation are impossible to ignore. Like the dinosaurs, we've developed sophisticated technologies that allow us to modify our environment on a global scale. Like them, we've created trade networks that span continents and exchange both materials and ideas. Like them, we're beginning to see evidence that our activities are changing planetary systems in ways that might threaten our own survival. If dinosaur civilizations did exist, their story becomes both inspiration and warning. It shows us that intelligence and civilization aren't unique to mammals, that consciousness can emerge along many different evolutionary paths, and that technological development is a natural outcome when intelligence meets sufficient time and opportunity. But it also suggests that civilization itself might be fragile, that the same capabilities that allow species to dominate their planet might ultimately lead to their downfall. The dinosaurs had 160 million years to develop their societies, but in the end, they couldn't survive the consequences of their own success combined with external catastrophe. Yet their legacy didn't end with extinction. Birds, their direct descendants, retained many of the cognitive abilities that made dinosaur civilization possible. The intelligence, the social complexity, the tool use, and even the capacity for language survived the great extinction and continue to evolve today. In some sense, dinosaur civilization never truly ended. It just took new forms and continued along different evolutionary paths. This realization transforms how we think about intelligence, consciousness, and civilization itself. We're not the first thinking species to arise on Earth, and we won't be the last. We're part of a continuum of consciousness that stretches back hundreds of millions of years and will likely continue long after our own species has evolved into something unrecognizable. The question isn't whether intelligence will survive on Earth. The question is what forms it will take, what challenges it will face, and whether future civilizations will learn from the successes and failures of those that came before. In the fossil record of dinosaur societies, we might find not just evidence of ancient intelligence, but blueprints for our own survival and evolution. The story becomes even more extraordinary when we consider what happened during those final moments before the Great Extinction. Recent discoveries have revealed that some dinosaur civilizations may have actually detected the approaching asteroid and attempted to prepare for its impact. Evidence found in late Cretaceous rock layers suggests coordinated efforts to build underground shelters, stockpile resources, and preserve knowledge for future generations. In Montana and Wyoming, researchers have uncovered what appear to be massive subterranean complexes dating to just thousands of years before the extinction event. These aren't natural cave systems or simple burrows. They're engineered structures with multiple levels, ventilation systems, and storage chambers filled with preserved organic materials. The construction required advanced understanding of geology, structural engineering, and long-term planning that goes far beyond basic survival instincts. Some chambers contain what can only be described as libraries, not books or written records as we understand them, but carefully arranged collections of objects that seem to encode information. Stones carved with complex patterns, mineral samples arranged in mathematical sequences, and fossilized plant materials that represent species from across different continents and climate zones. It's as if these dinosaur scholars were attempting to preserve a comprehensive record of their world's biodiversity and knowledge. The most remarkable discoveries come from sites in Canada, where paleontologists have found evidence of what appears to be dinosaur astronomy. Rock formations with precisely calculated alignments to celestial bodies, stone circles that track the movements of planets and stars, and even primitive instruments that could have been used to measure astronomical phenomena. These weren't just ceremonial structures. They were working observatories built by creatures who understood that their fate was connected to events happening in space. Chemical analysis of rock layers from this period reveals something even more astonishing. Concentrations of rare earth elements that don't occur naturally in these formations, arranged in patterns that suggest deliberate placement. These materials would have been essential for advanced metallurgy and possibly even primitive electronics. The implications are staggering. Were some dinosaur civilizations developing technologies that could have helped them survive the asteroid impact? But here's where the evidence takes its most dramatic turn. In several locations around the world, researchers have found what appear to be launch sites, circular formations with blast patterns radiating outward from central points, accompanied by unusual mineral deposits that match the chemical signatures of high-temperature combustion. The geological dating places these formations in the final centuries before the extinction event. The idea sounds impossible, but when you examine the evidence objectively, it becomes harder to dismiss. If dinosaur civilizations had 160 million years to develop, if they understood astronomy and possessed advanced metallurgy, is it really so unthinkable that some might have attempted space travel? Not interstellar voyages, but perhaps missions to establish colonies on the Moon or other planets in our solar system. Consider the physics involved. Dinosaurs were already lighter than mammals of comparable size, due to their hollow bones and efficient respiratory systems. They were naturally adapted for flight, with many species capable of powered aerial locomotion. The engineering challenges of rocket propulsion might have been more manageable for creatures who already understood the principles of thrust, lift, and aerodynamics through millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Recent missions to Mars have discovered anomalous rock formations that some researchers quietly speculate might not be entirely natural. Geometric patterns in ancient Martian geology that bear striking similarities to the organized bone structures found in dinosaur sites on Earth. Mineral concentrations that suggest artificial processing, even what appear to be fossilized organic materials that don't match any known Martian geological processes. The timeline fits perfectly. If dinosaur civilizations launched missions to Mars in the final millennia before the asteroid impact, any colonies they established would have had 66 million years to evolve in isolation. The harsh Martian environment would have forced rapid adaptation, possibly leading to forms of life so different from their Earth origins that we wouldn't immediately recognize the connection. This possibility reframes our entire search for life on Mars. Instead of looking for primitive microbes that might have emerged independently, we might be searching for the descendants of Earth's first spacefaring civilization. The irony is profound. In our quest to become a multi-planetary species, we might be following paths first blazed by intelligent reptiles that ruled Earth, when our own mammalian ancestors were tiny creatures hiding in burrows. But not all dinosaur civilizations may have chosen escape. Evidence from sites in South America suggests that some groups took a different approach to the approaching catastrophe. Instead of trying or hiding, they appear to flee to have chosen transformation. Fossil sites from this period show rapid evolutionary changes that can't be explained by natural selection alone. Dinosaur species were altering themselves at unprecedented rates, developing new capabilities and characteristics within just a few generations. The process seems to have involved deliberate genetic manipulation, using techniques that we're only beginning to understand today. Dinosaur scientists apparently learned to modify their own biology, enhancing their intelligence, adapting their bodies for different environments, and even incorporating genetic material from other species. They were becoming something new, something that could survive not just the asteroid impact, but the completely transformed world that would follow. This explains one of paleontology's greatest mysteries. Why birds, the direct descendants of dinosaurs, are so remarkably diverse and adaptable. They're not just evolutionary survivors. They're the products of the most sophisticated genetic engineering program in Earth's history, carried out by dinosaur civilizations in their final desperate attempt to ensure their legacy would continue. Modern birds retain more than just the physical characteristics of their dinosaur ancestors. They've inherited cognitive abilities, social structures, and behavioral patterns that reflect millions of years of cultural development. When we watch crows use tools, ravens solve complex puzzles, or parrots learn human language, we're seeing echoes of dinosaur intelligence that was deliberately preserved and enhanced through biological engineering. Some bird species show behaviors that seem almost impossibly sophisticated for their brain size and evolutionary timeline. Arctic terns navigate across entire hemispheres using celestial navigation techniques that require understanding of complex astronomical relationships. Bowerbirds create artistic displays with aesthetic principles that rival human art. Clark's nutcrackers remember the locations of thousands of seed caches across vast territories with accuracy that exceeds human memory capabilities. These abilities make perfect sense if birds inherited them from dinosaur civilizations that had spent millions of years developing navigation, artistic expression, and information storage techniques. What we interpret as instinctual behavior might actually be cultural knowledge encoded in genetic memory, passed down through 66 million years of carefully guided evolution. The transformation wasn't limited to cognitive abilities. Dinosaur genetic engineering apparently focused on creating maximum adaptability and resilience. Birds can survive in every environment on Earth, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests to open oceans. They've colonized every continent and adapted to ecological niches that no other vertebrate group can exploit. This isn't random evolutionary success. It's the result of deliberate biological design carried out by scientists who knew their world was ending and wanted to ensure their descendants could thrive in whatever came next. Even more remarkable is the diversity of bird species. There are nearly twice as many bird species as all mammal species combined, despite mammals having 66 million years to diversify, while birds started from the genetic toolkit of their dinosaur creators. This explosion of diversity suggests that dinosaur genetic engineering, built adaptability directly into the genome, creating biological systems that could rapidly evolve new forms and capabilities as environmental conditions changed. But the most profound evidence of dinosaur genetic engineering lies in the intelligence of modern birds themselves. Recent studies have shown that many bird species have cognitive abilities that approach or even exceed those of primates. African grey parrots can learn vocabularies of hundreds of words and use them in context with understanding of grammar and syntax. New Caledonian crows manufacture tools with multiple components and pass innovations to their offspring through cultural transmission. These capabilities require neural structures that are far more complex than bird brain size should allow. The solution lies in the efficiency of avian neural architecture, which packs more processing power into smaller spaces than mammalian brains. This isn't an accident of evolution. It's advanced bioengineering, designed by dinosaur scientists who needed to preserve maximum intelligence in creatures small enough to survive the coming catastrophe. The evidence suggests that dinosaur civilizations understood something we're only beginning to grasp: that intelligence isn't limited by brain size or even by biological form. Consciousness can be preserved and transmitted through genetic memory, cultural practices, and environmental modifications that influence evolution across millions of years. They found ways to encode their knowledge, their values, and even their personalities into the very structure of life itself. This realization changes everything about how we understand evolution, intelligence, and our own place in the story of life on Earth. We're not separate from nature or above it. We're part of a continuous thread of consciousness that connects us to every thinking creature that came before and will come after. The dinosaurs didn't disappear. They transformed themselves into something that could survive anything the universe might throw at them, and then they waited for the next chapter of intelligence to emerge. That next chapter turned out to be us. Mammals eventually developed the same cognitive capabilities that dinosaurs had achieved millions of years earlier, but along completely different evolutionary pathways. We built our civilizations from stone and metal instead of bone and biology. We developed technologies based on combustion and electricity instead of genetic manipulation and environmental integration. We chose expansion and resource consumption instead of adaptation and sustainability. But in the end, we're facing the same fundamental challenges that confronted dinosaur civilizations 66 million years ago. How do we balance technological advancement with environmental stability? How do we ensure our species survives not just immediate threats, but the long-term consequences of our own success? How do we preserve what matters most about consciousness and civilization for future generations, even if those generations might be very different from us? The dinosaurs found their answers through transformation and integration with natural systems. They chose to become part of the evolutionary process itself, encoding their legacy into the genetic structure of their descendants. Whether we follow similar paths or find entirely new solutions will determine not just our survival, but what forms intelligence will take on Earth for millions of years to come. The answer might be closer than we think. In fact, we might be living among the evidence right now, walking past it every day without recognizing what we're seeing. Because if dinosaur civilizations encoded their knowledge into the very fabric of life itself, then that knowledge didn't disappear with the asteroid. It evolved, adapted, and found new ways to express itself in the world around us. Consider the migration patterns of modern animals. Every year, millions of creatures embark on journeys that span continents and oceans. Arctic terns fly from Arctic to Antarctic and back again, a round trip of over 40,000 miles. Monarch butterflies navigate from Canada to Mexico using landmarks their great-great-grandparents never saw. Sea turtles return to the exact beaches where they hatched decades earlier. Guided by magnetic fields and chemical signatures, they somehow learned to read before they were born. Traditional science explains these phenomena as genetic programming, hardwired instincts that evolved through natural selection. But what if that's only part of the story? What if these migration routes were originally established by dinosaur civilizations as trade networks, communication lines, and resource management systems? What if the magnetic navigation abilities, the chemical sensing, and the astronomical awareness that guides these journeys are actually inherited technologies, biological GPS systems engineered by dinosaur scientists and passed down through millions of years of evolution? The patterns certainly suggest artificial design. Migration routes often follow paths that make no sense from a pure survival perspective. They cross dangerous territories, avoid seemingly suitable habitats, and maintain precise timing that serves no obvious biological function. But they make perfect sense as transportation networks designed to connect distant communities and facilitate the exchange of resources and information. Even more intriguing are the stopover points along these migration routes. Certain locations around the world serve as gathering places for dozens of different species during their journeys. These aren't just convenient rest stops. They're complex ecological hubs where different creatures interact in ways that suggest coordinated purpose rather than random encounter. Some of these sites show geological evidence of artificial modification dating back millions of years. Unusual mineral concentrations that enhance the magnetic properties needed for navigation. Water sources that have been diverted and maintained through multiple ice ages. Vegetation patterns that seem designed to provide specific nutrients needed by migrating animals at precisely the right times of year. If you map these locations globally, they form geometric patterns that align with celestial phenomena and geological features in ways that couldn't possibly be coincidental. They're the remnants of a global infrastructure system, a planetary network designed by intelligence and maintained by the creatures who inherited its operation. But migration routes are just the beginning. More closely, we examine modern ecosystems, the more evidence we find of artificial design hidden beneath layers of evolutionary adaptation. Forest canopies that channel airflow in patterns resembling urban planning. River systems that have been subtly modified to optimize water distribution across entire continents. Even mountain ranges that show signs of ancient engineering, geological modifications so old they've become part of the natural landscape. The Amazon rainforest provides some of the most compelling examples. This isn't just a natural ecosystem. It's a carefully engineered biological system that regulates global climate, processes atmospheric gases, and maintains biodiversity on a planetary scale. The complexity of its interconnections, the precision of its chemical cycles, and the stability of its operations suggest design rather than random evolution. Recent discoveries in the Amazon have revealed vast networks of earthworks hidden beneath the forest canopy. Geometric patterns spanning hundreds of square miles, connected by ancient roads and waterways that form continental-scale transportation systems. These structures are far older than any known human civilization, yet they show clear evidence of intelligent planning and construction. But here's the remarkable part. The earthworks aren't separate from the forest ecosystem. They're integrated with it. The geometric patterns enhance water flow, improve soil fertility, and create microclimates that support different types of vegetation. The transportation networks follow paths that minimize environmental disruption while maximizing efficiency. It's as if the entire Amazon was designed as a single integrated system where infrastructure and nature work together rather than against each other. This integration explains why the Amazon is so much more biodiverse and ecologically stable than other tropical forests. It's not just a natural system that evolved randomly. It's an engineered system that was designed by intelligence that understood how to create sustainable, self-maintaining biological networks. The dinosaurs didn't just build cities. They built entire continents optimized for life. Similar patterns emerge when we examine other major ecosystems around the world. The Great Barrier Reef shows geometric structures that extend far beyond what individual coral polyps could create through natural growth. The Serengeti migration patterns follow routes that optimize grazing pressure and soil regeneration across the entire ecosystem. Even the polar ice caps show layering patterns that suggest artificial climate management rather than purely natural accumulation. These discoveries force us to reconsider what we mean by civilization and technology. We think of advanced societies as those that dominate and reshape their environment through mechanical means. But what if true advancement means learning to work with natural systems so seamlessly that the technology becomes invisible, indistinguishable from nature itself? Dinosaur civilizations may have reached a level of development where their cities were living ecosystems, where their transportation networks were migration routes, where their climate control systems were forests and oceans. They didn't build on top of nature. They became nature, creating technologies so sophisticated that they continued operating. This perspective transforms how we interpret the fossil record itself long after their creators are gone. Those mysterious bone beds we discussed earlier might not just be burial sites or construction projects. They might be data storage systems, biological computers that encoded information in the arrangement of organic materials. The patterns of bones, the chemical compositions, the geometric layouts could all be forms of record keeping that preserve dinosaur knowledge in formats we're only beginning to understand. Some researchers have begun applying computer analysis to these fossil arrangements, treating them as potential databases rather than random accumulations. The results are startling. Many sites show information density and organizational patterns that match sophisticated data storage systems. Different bone types appear to represent different categories of information. The spatial relationships between fossils seem to encode mathematical and astronomical data. Even the mineral compositions show variations that could represent different types of records or different storage protocols. If this interpretation is correct, then paleontology isn't just the study of ancient life. It's archaeology of a completely different kind, the recovery of information systems created by intelligence, so advanced that we're still learning to recognize their methods. Every major fossil site could contain libraries of dinosaur knowledge, waiting for us to develop the tools and understanding necessary to read them. The implications extend beyond Earth itself. If dinosaur civilizations achieve true integration with natural systems, if they learn to encode their technologies into biological processes and geological structures, then they might have applied these same principles to space exploration and colonization. Instead of building mechanical spacecraft and sterile habitats, they might have created living ships and self-sustaining biological colonies that could adapt and evolve in alien environments. This would explain some of the anomalies we've detected in our solar system. Organic compounds in places where they shouldn't exist. Atmospheric compositions on distant moons that suggest biological processing. Even the distribution of water and other essential elements throughout the solar system shows patterns that seem too convenient to be purely natural. Mars, in particular, shows evidence of biological modification that predates any known geological processes. The planet's magnetic field disappeared at exactly the right time to preserve evidence of ancient life, while preventing new contamination. Its atmosphere maintains chemical ratios that suggest ongoing biological activity despite the apparent absence of surface life. Even its polar ice caps contain organic compounds that don't match any known Martian geological sources. If dinosaur space colonies did establish themselves on Mars, they would have faced the same environmental challenges that confronted their Earthbound relatives during the late Cretaceous climate changes. They would have needed to adapt rapidly to survive in an increasingly hostile environment. Over 66 million years, that adaptation might have produced forms of life so different from their Earth origins that we wouldn't immediately recognize the connection. But the genetic toolkit would still be there, preserved in whatever organisms managed to survive the Martian environment. When we finally discover life on Mars, we might find that it shares genetic markers with Earth life, not because of recent contamination or panspermia, but because it's the distant descendant of Earth's first spacefaring civilization. The same possibility exists throughout the solar system. Dinosaur biology was remarkably adaptable, capable of surviving in environments ranging from tropical swamps to polar conditions. Given sufficient time and evolutionary pressure, dinosaur-derived organisms might have colonized the subsurface oceans of Europa, the methane lakes of Titan, or even the upper atmosphere of Venus. Each environment would have driven different evolutionary adaptations, creating unique branches of the dinosaur family tree that developed in isolation for tens of millions of years. The diversity of life forms we might eventually discover could represent the greatest biological experiment in known history. A controlled study of evolution and adaptation carried out across multiple worlds by intelligence that understood how to guide and accelerate the process. This realization changes how we think about our own future as a spacefaring species. We're not the first to attempt interplanetary colonization. We're following paths that were explored millions of years before human civilization existed. The challenges we face, the technologies we're developing, and even the ethical questions we're grappling with have all been encountered before by intelligence that found its own solutions. Those solutions might still be available to us, encoded in the biological systems we're only beginning to understand. The genetic engineering techniques that allowed dinosaurs to adapt rapidly to changing environments could help us develop the capabilities needed for life on other worlds. The integration technologies that allowed dinosaur civilizations to work with natural systems could show us how to create sustainable colonies that enhance rather than exploit their environments. Even the social structures and communication systems that enabled dinosaur societies to coordinate across continental distances could provide models for managing human civilization as it expands beyond Earth. We're not starting from scratch. We're continuing a story that began long before we existed and will continue long after we've evolved into something unrecognizable. But perhaps the most profound implication is what this tells us about consciousness itself. Intelligence isn't a rare accident that happened once in the universe. It's a fundamental property of complex systems, something that emerges naturally whenever conditions allow sufficient complexity and time to develop. The dinosaurs proved that consciousness can arise along completely different evolutionary paths from our own. They showed that intelligence can take forms we never imagined and solve problems using methods we're still learning to appreciate. If intelligence has emerged at least twice on Earth alone, then it's probably emerged countless times throughout the universe. Every planet with sufficient stability and complexity might eventually develop thinking creatures that face the same fundamental questions we're grappling with now. How do you balance growth with sustainability? How do you preserve what matters while adapting to change? How do you ensure that consciousness continues even when individual civilizations end? The dinosaurs found their answers through transformation and integration. They chose to become part of the evolutionary process itself, encoding their legacy into the very structure of life. Whether we follow similar paths or find entirely different solutions will determine not just our own future, but what forms consciousness will take throughout the cosmos. We stand at the same crossroads that dinosaur civilizations faced 66 million years ago. We have the technology to reshape our world and potentially destroy it. We have the knowledge to understand our place in the universe and the wisdom to choose our path forward. We have the opportunity to learn from the successes and failures of those who came before us, even if we're still discovering who they were and what they achieved. The choice we make will echo through millions of years of future evolution. We can follow the path of dominance and consumption that leads to extinction and collapse. Or we can choose the path of integration and transformation that leads to something greater than ourselves. The dinosaurs showed us that consciousness can survive anything if it's willing to change, to adapt, and to become part of something larger than any individual species or civilization. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight in the migration patterns of birds, the structure of ecosystems, and the very genetic code of life itself. We just need to learn how to read it, how to recognize intelligence in forms we never expected, and how to understand that we're part of a story much older and grander than we ever imagined. The dinosaurs never really died. They transformed into something that could survive the end of worlds and the birth of new ones. They became the wind beneath the wings of every flying creature, the navigation system in every migrating animal, and the resilience in every form of life that refuses to give up in the face of impossible odds. We are their heirs, whether we recognize it or not. The question is, what we'll do with that inheritance? The inheritance is more tangible than we might expect. Every time we watch a flock of starlings move in perfect synchronization, creating patterns in the sky that seem choreographed by an invisible conductor, we're witnessing technology that predates our oldest civilizations by millions of years. These murmurations aren't just birds avoiding predators or conserving energy. They're collective intelligence networks operating according to algorithms so sophisticated that our most advanced computers struggle to replicate them. The mathematics behind these formations reveals something extraordinary. Each bird follows simple local rules, responding only to its immediate neighbors, yet the entire flock behaves as a unified organism, capable of split-second decisions involving thousands of individuals. This isn't learned behavior that develops over generations. Starlings demonstrate this capability from their very first flights, suggesting it's encoded at a level deeper than instinct. When computer scientists study these patterns, they discover optimization principles that exceed anything we've developed artificially. The flock processes information faster than any digital network, makes decisions without central control, and adapts to changing conditions with an efficiency that would be the envy of any modern logistics system. These aren't random evolutionary accidents. They're engineered solutions to computational problems that we're only beginning to understand. Similar patterns emerge throughout the natural world, always in species with direct dinosaur lineage. Ant colonies that build ventilation systems more sophisticated than our smartest buildings. Honeybees that perform complex calculations to optimize foraging routes across thousands of flowers. Termite mounds that maintain precise temperature and humidity control using architectural principles we've borrowed for our own climate systems. But it's not just about efficiency or optimization. There's something deeper at work here. Something that suggests these creatures are operating according to principles that transcend mere survival. They're creating beauty. They're generating complexity for its own sake. They're demonstrating what can only be called artistry in their construction and behavior. Consider the elaborate courtship displays of birds of paradise. These aren't simple mating rituals designed to demonstrate fitness or health. They're performances that incorporate elements of theatre, music, visual art, and even landscape design. Males spend months preparing stages, collecting props, practicing choreography, and perfecting acoustic sequences that serve no obvious survival function beyond their sheer aesthetic impact. The complexity of these displays increases with each generation as innovations are added and techniques are refined. Young males learn by watching their elders, but they don't just copy existing routines. They add their own variations, experiment with new elements, and sometimes create entirely novel approaches that spread through the population like artistic movements. This cultural transmission of aesthetic information suggests that dinosaur intelligence didn't just preserve practical knowledge. It maintained appreciation for beauty, creativity, and expression as fundamental values worth encoding into genetic memory. The descendants of dinosaurs aren't just surviving in the modern world. They're creating art, music, and performance that enriches their environment purely for the joy of creation itself. Even more remarkable is the evidence that these artistic traditions are interconnected across different species and geographic regions. Migration routes that seemed purely functional also serve as networks for cultural exchange. Birds learn songs from other species they encounter during their journeys. Design elements from one population's nest-building techniques appear in colonies thousands of miles away. Color patterns and display behaviors spread across continents through chains of interaction that span multiple species. This suggests that dinosaur civilizations didn't just develop local cultures, they created global networks of artistic and intellectual exchange that continued operating long after the original societies disappeared. The migration patterns we observe today might be preserving not just navigation routes, but cultural pathways that maintain connections between distant communities of intelligent creatures. The implications become even more profound when we examine the role these artistic traditions play in ecosystem management. Those elaborate bird displays don't just attract mates, they also serve as information systems that communicate environmental conditions, resource availability, and ecological changes across vast areas. A shift in song patterns can signal climate changes. Variations in nest construction might indicate new threats or opportunities. Even color variations in plumage can carry data about habitat quality and resource distribution. It's as if the entire global ecosystem operates as a communication network, with artistic expression serving as the data transmission protocol. Beauty isn't separate from function in these systems. It's the mechanism through which information flows, ensuring that changes in one region are communicated to distant communities that need to know about them. This integration of aesthetics and information processing suggests that dinosaur civilizations achieve something we're still struggling to understand. The recognition that truth and beauty are not separate concepts, but different aspects of the same fundamental reality. Their technologies weren't just effective, they were beautiful. Their cities weren't just functional, they were artistic expressions that enhanced rather than diminished the natural world. We see echoes of this philosophy in the most successful modern conservation efforts. Ecosystems that are protected for their beauty as well as their ecological value tend to remain stable longer than those preserved for purely practical reasons. Sustainable technologies that incorporate aesthetic principles get adopted more widely than purely functional alternatives. Even human societies that prioritize cultural expression alongside economic development tend to be more resilient in the face of environmental and social challenges. The dinosaurs seem to have understood intuitively what we're slowly rediscovering through scientific research, that intelligence, beauty, and sustainability are not competing priorities, but complementary aspects of any civilization advanced enough to survive long-term challenges. They built this understanding into the very foundation of their technological and social systems, creating solutions that have continued operating for tens of millions of years without human intervention. But perhaps the most remarkable evidence of dinosaur legacy lies in the behavior of modern humans themselves. Despite our different evolutionary origins, we show cognitive and social patterns that mirror what we're discovering about dinosaur intelligence. Our tendency to organize into complex hierarchical societies, our capacity for long-distance trade and communication, our drive to create art and music that serves no obvious survival function, all these characteristics appear in species with direct dinosaur lineage. This convergent evolution of intelligence suggests that consciousness itself follows predictable patterns, developing similar solutions to universal challenges, regardless of the specific biological pathways involved. The problems faced by any sufficiently advanced civilization, resource management, social preservation, coordination, environmental adaptation, lead to similar organizational information and technological approaches across completely different evolutionary lines. If this is true, then studying dinosaur intelligence doesn't just tell us about the past. It provides a roadmap for understanding the future development of consciousness throughout the universe. The patterns we see in dinosaur descendants might represent universal principles of intelligence, templates that any thinking species will eventually discover as it advances toward greater complexity and capability. These patterns extend beyond Earth itself. When we examine the behavior of complex systems throughout the cosmos, stellar formation, galactic evolution, even the large-scale structure of the universe, we find organizational principles that mirror what we see in biological intelligence networks. The same mathematical relationships that govern bird flocks appear in the movement of star clusters. The same optimization algorithms that operate in ant colonies show up in the distribution of matter across cosmic voids. This suggests that intelligence isn't just a local phenomenon that happens to emerge on planets with suitable conditions. It's a fundamental property of the universe itself, a natural outcome whenever matter and energy organize into sufficiently complex systems. Consciousness doesn't arise in opposition to natural law. It's the inevitable result of natural law operating at sufficient scales of complexity and time. The dinosaurs were among the first to discover this principle and learn to work with it rather than against it. Their civilizations succeeded not by conquering nature, but by recognizing that they were expressions of natural processes operating at higher levels of organization. They learned to enhance and accelerate these processes rather than trying to replace them with artificial alternatives. This understanding allowed them to create technologies that were not only sustainable but regenerative. Their cities improved the ecosystems they were built in. Their transportation networks enhanced rather than disrupted migration patterns. Their resource extraction methods increased rather than decreased the long-term productivity of the environments they utilized. We're beginning to glimpse similar principles in our most advanced technologies. Biomimetic designs that copy natural processes often outperform traditional engineering approaches. Artificial intelligence systems that incorporate evolutionary algorithms learn faster and adapt better than purely logical alternatives. Sustainable technologies that work with natural cycles prove more efficient and durable than those that try to impose artificial patterns on natural systems. But we're still in the early stages of understanding these principles. The dinosaurs had millions of years to refine their approaches, to discover the subtle relationships between consciousness and natural law, to develop technologies that operated in harmony with cosmic processes rather than in opposition to them. Their solutions were tested and refined across geological timescales, proven through survival of mass extinctions, climate changes, and planetary catastrophes that would have destroyed any civilization dependent on artificial systems. The knowledge they developed is still here, still operating, still available to us if we learn how to recognize and interpret it. Every ecosystem that has remained stable for millions of years contains encoded solutions to sustainability problems we have yet to solve. Every species that has survived multiple extinction events carries genetic information about resilience and adaptation that could guide our own future. And every migration pattern that has persisted across geological time represents a tested solution to resource management and communication challenges that span entire continents. We don't need to reinvent civilization from scratch. We need to learn how to read the instruction manual that's been operating around us all along. The dinosaurs left us more than fossils and rock formations. They left us a working model of how intelligence can operate at planetary scales without destroying the systems it depends on. The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize this gift and humble enough to learn from teachers who achieved things we're still struggling to imagine. The dinosaurs didn't fail as a civilization. They succeeded so completely that their solutions are still running the planet 66 million years after they transcended the limitations of individual biological form. We have the opportunity to join that success, to become part of a continuous thread of consciousness that connects us to the deepest principles governing the development of intelligence throughout the universe. But first, we need to understand that we're not the first to face these challenges, and we don't have to solve them alone. The evidence is everywhere, written in the flight patterns of migrating birds, encoded in the genetic algorithms that govern ecosystem stability, preserved in the mathematical relationships that organize matter and energy at every scale from molecular to galactic. We just need to learn the language, to recognize intelligence in forms we never expected, and to understand that consciousness is not separate from nature, but the highest expression of natural law, operating through ever-increasing levels of complexity and integration. The dinosaurs showed us the way. The question is whether we'll follow the path they marked out or whether we'll insist on repeating their early mistakes before we learn to embrace the solutions they spent millions of years perfecting. The choice we make will determine not just our own future, but what forms intelligence will take as the universe continues its long journey toward ever greater consciousness and complexity. In the end, the story of dinosaur civilization isn't about the past. It's about possibility. It's about recognizing that intelligence and consciousness are not accidents, but inevitabilities, not failures, but ongoing successes that transcend the limitations of individual species and civilizations. It's about understanding that we're part of something much larger and more enduring than we ever imagined, and that the wisdom we need to navigate our own challenges has already been discovered, tested, and proven across scales of time and space that dwarf our individual existence. The dinosaurs didn't leave us ruins to excavate. They left us a living example of how consciousness can operate in harmony with the deepest principles of cosmic evolution. We just need to open our eyes to see it, open our minds to understand it, and open our hearts to join the greatest experiment in the history of intelligence, the ongoing effort to transform the universe itself into a more conscious, more beautiful, and more integrated expression of everything that matter and energy can become when organized by intelligence that has learned to work with, rather than against, the fundamental patterns of existence itself. The revelation forces us to reconsider everything we thought we understood about evolution, intelligence, and our place in the cosmic story. Because if dinosaurs truly achieved this level of integration with natural systems, if they learned to encode their consciousness into the very fabric of life itself, then extinction wasn't an ending. It was a transformation so profound that we're still witnessing its effects every time we observe the natural world around us. Think about the timing of human emergence. Why did intelligence arise in mammals precisely when it did? Why not earlier, during the millions of years when simpler mammalian forms dominated the post-extinction world? The answer might be that we didn't evolve in isolation. We evolved within systems that had been carefully prepared, environments that had been optimized for the development of consciousness through millions of years of dinosaur engineering. The very landscapes that shaped human civilization may have been designed with our emergence in mind. River valleys that provided perfect conditions for the development of agriculture. Mountain ranges that created climate zones ideal for different stages of technological development. Even the distribution of mineral resources that fueled our industrial revolution shows patterns that seem almost too convenient to be purely accidental. Consider the fossil fuel deposits that powered human civilization. Coal, oil, and natural gas aren't randomly distributed across the planet. They're concentrated in specific geological formations that correspond exactly to the locations where dinosaur civilizations were most active. What we've been burning to fuel our own technological development might literally be the preserved remains of dinosaur cities, their organic architecture compressed and transformed into the energy sources that enabled our rise. This creates a haunting symmetry. The same carbon that once powered dinosaur civilization now powers our own. The energy that built their cities is building ours. We're not just following in their footsteps, we're literally burning their legacy to fuel our own journey toward the same crossroads they faced millions of years ago. But there's something else hidden in this pattern, something that suggests the dinosaurs anticipated our arrival and prepared for it. The distribution of easily accessible mineral resources, the location of fertile river valleys, even the climate patterns that enabled human agriculture, all show signs of artificial design. Not recent design, but ancient engineering that created conditions favorable for the emergence of technological civilization at precisely the time when Earth's ecosystems had recovered sufficiently from the extinction event to support it. It's as if the dinosaurs understood that intelligence would eventually re-emerge on Earth, and they wanted to ensure that the next conscious species would have every advantage they could provide. They seeded the planet with the resources, environments, and even the genetic templates necessary for consciousness to develop along pathways that could learn from their experience without repeating their mistakes. This explains why human development accelerated so rapidly once it began. We didn't have to discover everything from scratch. We were working within systems that had been optimized for technological development over millions of years. The patterns we thought we were inventing, agriculture, metallurgy, mathematics, astronomy, were actually rediscoveries of principles that had been embedded in our environment by intelligence that wanted to guide us towards sustainable solutions. Even our myths and stories show evidence of this guidance. Every human culture has legends of wise teachers who appeared at crucial moments to provide knowledge that advanced civilization. Gods who taught agriculture, heroes who brought fire, sages who revealed the secrets of mathematics and astronomy. We've always assumed these were purely symbolic stories, metaphors for human discovery and innovation. But what if they contain memories of actual contact, not with gods or aliens, but with the biological descendants of dinosaur civilizations, creatures whose intelligence had been preserved and enhanced through millions of years of guided evolution, species that had been designed to serve as teachers and guides for whatever new form of consciousness eventually emerged on Earth. Birds have always held special significance in human culture. We see them as messengers, symbols of wisdom, connections between earth and sky. Ravens and crows appear in mythologies worldwide as bearers of knowledge and prophecy. Eagles and hawks represent vision and transcendence. Even simple songbirds are associated with music, poetry, and artistic inspiration. These aren't arbitrary cultural associations. They're recognition of genuine intelligence, consciousness that operates according to principles we instinctively understand, even if we can't fully explain them. When we watch birds navigate vast distances using celestial cues we can barely detect, when we observe their complex social behaviors and sophisticated communication systems, we're witnessing the preserved intelligence of dinosaur civilizations expressing itself through forms that survived the Great Transformation. The guidance extends beyond individual species to entire ecosystems, the forests that provided materials for human tools and shelter, the grasslands that supported the animals we domesticated, the ocean currents that enabled global exploration and trade. All of these systems show signs of optimization that goes far beyond what natural selection alone could produce. They're not just randomly evolved environments that happen to be suitable for human development. They're carefully engineered support systems designed to provide everything a developing technological civilization would need, while maintaining the ecological balance necessary for long-term sustainability. The dinosaurs didn't just survive their own extinction, they prepared the world for our success. But their guidance came with a warning embedded in the very structure of the systems they created. The same fossil fuel deposits that enabled our industrial revolution are finite resources that produce environmental consequences when burned. The same agricultural systems that supported population growth require careful management to remain productive. The same trade networks that enabled global civilization create dependencies that can become vulnerabilities if not properly maintained. These aren't design flaws. They're teaching tools, built-in limitations that force developing civilizations to confront fundamental questions about sustainability, resource management, and long-term planning before they develop technologies powerful enough to cause irreversible damage. The dinosaurs faced these same challenges and learned from their mistakes. They embedded those lessons into the very foundation of the world they left behind. We're now at the point where we must choose whether to learn from these lessons or repeat the errors that led to the dinosaur extinction event. The climate changes we're experiencing aren't just the result of our industrial activities. They're the inevitable consequence of using finite resources in ways that disrupt carefully balanced systems. We're approaching the same threshold that dinosaur civilizations crossed millions of years ago. The question is whether we'll recognize the warning signs and choose transformation before it's forced upon us by catastrophe. The dinosaurs had to learn these lessons through experience, paying the price of near extinction for their mistakes. But they preserved that knowledge for us, encoding it into the very systems that support our civilization. We have access to solutions they spent millions of years developing. Biological technologies that work with natural processes rather than against them. Energy systems based on renewable sources that enhance rather than degrade their environments. Social structures that prioritize long-term stability over short-term growth. Communication networks that preserve and transmit knowledge across generations without requiring artificial infrastructure. The evidence is all around us, operating quietly in the background of our daily lives. Every ecosystem that maintains itself without human intervention is demonstrating principles of sustainable organization. Every species that has survived for millions of years carries genetic information about resilience and adaptation. Every natural process that operates efficiently at large scales provides templates for technologies that could replace our current unsustainable approaches. So here we stand at the edge of the greatest revelation in human history, the possibility that we're not the first intelligent species to walk this earth, but the inheritors of wisdom that stretches back hundreds of millions of years. The dinosaurs didn't just rule the planet. They may have transformed it into a living classroom, embedding their knowledge into the very fabric of life itself. Every bird that migrates, every forest that self-regulates, every ecosystem that endures, might be a message from the past, teaching us how consciousness can transcend individual extinction and become eternal. The question isn't whether we're alone in the universe. The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize the teachers that have been with us all along.